I don't know. Say it with me. I don't know. Good God, it is liberating. I am a towering mountain of ignorance. I don't know. We're taught to believe that everything has a reason. And so we observe the world, we see what happened, and then we define the thing that happened as the reason the thing happened. But I think a lot of the time we end up mixing up thinking something with knowing something. This is why it can be so impossible to talk about certain topics with certain people. They've tied those suppositions to themselves so tightly with knots of narrative and constructed reality and values that there's just no untying it. And maybe unsurprisingly, in those situations, the best course of action is just to be friends. Maybe even ask them about that thing that they've created, because to them, it's immensely valuable. The world as we perceive it, as we've built it inside of ourselves, is a lie that we tell to ourselves, not out of deception, but out of necessity. We have no other choice. We simply cannot understand the world as it is, and so we construct. But sometimes I just have to tell myself the thing that is definitely true, the truest thing I can say, which is that I don't know.
Never know.
This is the Everyone's Agnostic Podcast with Bob Pondillo and Cass Midgley.
You know my heart, God. You know that I can't believe this thing if I'm being honest. You know these things. And if you're real and you need me to be a part of your family of God, and need me to be a child of God, then you know what it takes. You can come here. You could show up in this living room right now and prove to me that you exist. And that'll be enough. You can show up on my Damascus road and blind me and turn me around on a dime, because I know you can. And if it's true, then that's what I expect. And it never happened.
Welcome, everyone, to episode 117 of the Everyone's Agnostic Podcast. I'm Cass Midgley. Today, Bob and I interview Jeff Loken, another Minnesotan listener who reached out to me to share his story. When a fellow Lutheran friend lost his faith, Jeff felt called of God to rescue the apostate by sharpening his apologetic skills and engaging in a 2-year dialogue with him, only to discover that in the end he had lost the argument. And he had too much personal integrity to use the smart bomb of faith to wipe away his cognitive dissonances, or trick himself into thinking that even works. He had to admit to himself, his wife, his parents, that he couldn't believe any longer. Jeff points to an argument made by J.L. Schellenberg called nonresistant nonbelief, which is very similar to the argument for divine hiddenness. This argument says that if God exists and is perfectly loving and good, every reasonable person would be brought to believe in God. However, there are reasonable non-believers, therefore this God does not exist. Here's an excerpt from Schellenberg's book, The Wisdom of Doubt. Quote, "Consider those who have always believed in God and who would love to go on believing in God, but have found as adults that serious and honest examination of all the evidence of experience and argument they can lay their hands on has unexpectedly had the result of eroding their belief away. These are individuals who were happy and morally committed believers, and who remain morally committed, but are no longer happy because of the emotional effects of an intellectual reorganization involving the removal of theistic belief. Perhaps they will be happy again, but the point is that for the time being, it is the removal of theistic belief that they are inclined to resist, if anything. For they were still on friendly terms with God and benefiting in a variety of ways from what they took to be contact with God, when their belief in the existence of such a being was whisked away." Unquote. Bob and I fell in love with Jeff and his Midwestern cultural modesty. He's a sharp, humble guy trying to be honest about his lack of faith without letting the transition destroy his life. We taped this conversation on September 11th, 2016. If you're liking our show, please subscribe to it, give it 5 stars, or leave a review on iTunes, Stitcher, Spreaker, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, you can support us monetarily on a per-episode basis through our Patreon page. That's patreon.com/EA podcast. Or leave a donation through PayPal at our website, everyone'sagnostic.com. The opening monologue is an excerpt from a YouTube by Hank Green called Towering Mountain of Ignorance. The music behind it is Never Know by Jack Johnson. The segue music on this episode is Hard to Be by David Bazan. Thanks for listening, and be a yes-sayer to what is.
Hey, where are you from, Jeff?
I'm in the Minneapolis metro area. I live in a suburb of Minneapolis.
There is a magnet for the Everyone's Agnostic podcast in Minneapolis.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we got a lot of people up there.
Marie LePage lives around here somewhere.
We just did a show with Marie Kent.
Yep. Oh, okay.
And she's I mean, it just, you know, anyway.
A lot of smart people up there.
Now, she lives in the art district. Are you, I mean, that's an artsy town, right?
Yeah.
You know, yeah, it's for the area. I think it's probably got, you know, there really isn't a whole lot else around here. You go to Madison and there's a little contingent of, you know, liberal kind of artsy type people there, but and then Chicago is obviously got it.
So how close are you to Chicago?
6 hours.
Oh, okay.
About 6 hours. Yep. It's not bad.
Yeah, that's not bad. I'm trying, you know, I was telling Bob on the porch, you know, try to give him a bio, and we don't know much about you, so.
Yeah, I know. I apologize. You know, a couple of things.
No, it's fun. We're going to spelunk your cave, and we're going to find some gold.
I beg your pardon. That's not going to hurt, though.
There's a joke in there. So I'm gonna leave
something about orifices.
That's right.
Yeah, so I meant to, two things I meant to do, write you and kind of give you a bio, and then also I wanted to, like, read all your little questionnaire form thing and kind of take notes so that I don't get lost when I talk to you guys. But
none of that happened.
I don't often play this card, Cass and Bob, but I do have 4 kids and they're all under the age of 6, and so it kind of keeps me busy. So I didn't find the time.
Well, I had 4 kids in 5 years, and so you are busy. You
yeah,
probably
you
have
know.
at least 2 in diapers.
Then I'm not making an excuse. You can actually relate. That's good.
I mean, in a way, that chapter of my life. Now, my wife will tell you that I did my share of selfish things anyway, like the man, you know, and especially we were deeply embedded in Christianity and the patriarchy, and so she was a stay-at-home mom, and I did talk radio at night, and I had a job during the day, and so there's a little bit of bitterness, you know, I think in her heart about how checked out I was during those years, because total handful, you know.
Yeah, I can relate so much. That's basically our situation right now. By the time you deconstructed, though, Cass, your kids were older, right? They weren't.
Yeah, it was. So I did an episode where I interviewed my kids, and you know, thinking that they'd be kind of traumatized by the roller coaster of being pastors' kids for years and now atheist kids, and And they were like, nah, meh. They never, you know, drank the Kool-Aid or, you know. So one thing that I did that I think is probably, I dove in. I became more religious than my parents, you know. So I was raised kind of pseudo-social Christian, middle-class Oklahoma normalcy. But I took it to the next level to where I was, you know, I don't even know that they were familiar with the term born again or filled with the Spirit, or you know, some of these things where
you were though.
Yeah, where you take Christianity on nitrous oxide, and so were your parents religious?
Yeah, that's a good segue, I guess, maybe to my story. I grew up in North Dakota, northeastern North Dakota.
Okay.
As from where I live now, the place where I grew up is about 5 hours away. My parents have since moved from that small community, kind of a rural farming community, to Fargo, North Dakota.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
About 3 hours from the Minneapolis metro area. So I get to see them pretty often. And but my wife's parents live kind of in the same area where I grew up. We grew up about 20 miles away from each other. So I do actually kind of get up to that area still every now and then. But anyway, the religious community up there is a lot of Lutheranism, Lutheran Protestantism, which a lot of the podcasts I listen to, Cass, yours, and a bunch of other people, Mike McCarg, Science Mike McCarg, he's right. You know, they talk about Southern Baptists and stuff like that, and there's a lot of similarities, I think, but Lutheranism has this broad spectrum of,
it does, yeah.
of liberal, kind of left-leaning. They've got gay pastors now in the ALCA, and they've always had women. They've had women pastors for a long time.
Right. There's the different synods, right? That's the thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The biggest one is the ALCA, I believe.
Is that the liberal one?
Yeah, that's the very liberal one.
Okay.
And then on the other side of the spectrum, there's Missouri Synod. It's escaping. There's a bunch of synods. You're right, Bob. And the one I come from is smaller. I think it's like the 5th largest or something, or 6th largest. It might be growing or waning. I'm not sure, but it's called the Association Free Lutheran Congregations, AFLC.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a liberal one, or?
It is a very conservative one.
Conservative.
Very conservative. So to kind of illustrate it for you, people who belong to the congregation they allow us all sorts of different things. But there's a school, they call it, it's a Bible school. It's post-secondary, but it's non-accredited. And so really you just go and it's just Bible classes. So it's technically a college, but you really don't get anything out of it except for just indoctrination, essentially. And that's called the Association Free Lutheran Bible School, AFLBS, or AFLBS, as a lot of us called it. And anyway, there's separate women's and boys' dorms, no dancing, curfew at 10, no drinking, no smoking. The rules are all very rigid, very legalistic, and all in an attempt to kind of keep us all under wraps and make sure we don't do anything.
Be human in any way.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. Exactly.
And that's, you attended there?
I did. So yeah, my story is I was raised in that church, and then a lot of, when you're a part of a congregation that belongs to that denomination, there's a lot of pressure to attend that school. Even though it's expensive and it really doesn't go towards your college education at all. It's just to learn about the Bible. And so I come from a family of 3 boys. I was the middle one, and all 3 of us went to that school. And I probably say a lot of those things, maybe sounding like I'm disparaging it at all. I mean, when they sincerely believe everything they believe, and,
Sure.
and if it is true, that's probably a really good way to do it. I mean, that's I don't blame them for being sincere in their beliefs, and I don't blame
there's
them
no malice on
right,
their parts. They believe it. This is if you believed what they believe, they're doing the right thing, right?
Exactly.
Well, did you go to a different school? Did you go to an accredited undergraduate school? Or?
Yep. So I went there, and then I went to North Dakota State University in Fargo, and got a degree in English, which is for me, I wasn't really good at anything, and so I tried to pick something that I was least good at. I guess, and part of that
least
too.
Bad.
Yeah, least bad at, I should say. Yeah,
Right.
And I think part of that too is something I kind of wanted to talk, or I guess that could be a talking point for us, would be I growing up in high school, I did not take school seriously at all. And a big reason for me, I know I'm not like everyone, but a lot of Christians, but a big reason for me was because I knew that my time on earth was, temporary. I knew that my life here was temporary. Yeah. I didn't care a lot about, especially science, because I thought that it was fake. I didn't think that any of that stuff was real. I thought
it was the wisdom of man.
Yeah, exactly. I thought that the world was created in 7 days, and it's only 6,000 years old, and all that evolution crap was just, polluting my mind, and I didn't want to pay too much attention to that because I didn't want to worry about any of that stuff. And I early on, I had a heart for I was like you, Cass. I went a lot deeper than I think my parents ever did at my age anyway. I was all in. I really wanted, I think ministry was always on my radar, Christian ministry, as far as a possibility for vocation.
As young people, we hadn't figured out yet that most adults hold on very loosely to this stuff, or they kind of allow some of the mythology of it or the fictional narrative of it to they kind of balance, whereas when you're a kid and you're like, well, if this is true, we need to go balls to the wall. You guys are, we took Revelation, chapter 3, where if you're hot, I'd rather lukewarm. I'd rather you be hot or cold, because if you're lukewarm, I'll spit you out of my mouth. And we took that as almost a macho bravado, go for it, because if you're lukewarm, you're a pussy.
Exactly. No, that's true. I mean, that's totally, yeah. And it's all, the Bible's full of stuff like that, full of warnings from Paul, on how to be and how to live as a Christian, so that you don't fall victim to, apathy, and so that you don't become, like the people who fall away. And
I kind of wish, how the Bible, we have the red letter version where Jesus's words are in red. I kind of wish that they had color coded the scriptures to where maybe green text or something that would notate or designate that this is where smart people don't take serious. Or don't take literal.
Yeah, sure.
Be careful not to take this literal. That's what the green letter would mean, or something like that.
Wasn't there the Jesus Project try to do that, where they try to figure out which things
statements
Jesus
that
actually
Jesus
said?
Yeah, what's most likely,
And
that he said or
using
didn't
little
say.
black balls and green balls.
Yeah, no, but I'm saying as a young person with a concrete mind and literal thinking that I God damn it, it was so maddening when you finally, at middle age in my case, came out and realized that most of the Christian world hasn't been taking these things as seriously. And I knew that, but it was an indictment against them, not a virtue.
Right.
And then when I realized, I've been like overthinking this for 39 years, It was embarrassing. So that's why I'm saying I wish there was a green letter Bible.
I'm with you, man. I think, and I kind of hope that's where the majority of Christianity, at least the movement, is heading.
I think so. I think Trump is helping.
Yeah, when I deconstructed from fundamentalism, that's when I started listening to guys like Rob Bell, the Liturgist podcast, a lot of the progressive Christian thinkers who. If there is some truth to Christianity, I think they're onto something there. I think that they have if there's virtue, at least in Christianity, that they're tapping into it.
Exactly.
And I hope that is what the world hopefully it remembers about Christianity when it's all said and done. I know there's a lot of other crap out there that they can pull through from the Dark Ages, but
well, on the deconversion, let's say like you're on a bus or a train and you got stops along the way, a subway, and you see the map. And so on the deconversion process, some people stop at that place where they're not going to entirely release Jesus. They're going to keep Jesus. And those people, like you're saying, the Michael Gungers of the world and the Rob Bells and Brian McLarens of the world, that they at least like that stop that they get off on, whereas we keep going, that stop that they get off on is not a bad stop. And it's not a bad Christianity. And I agree with you that if there was one that's not only that we hope goes down in history as the best one, it might be the only one that survives and is worthy of survival. Like, because, truth will out, time will tell. There's even a scripture that says all that can be shaken will be shaken. And so what's left when you're done shaking the tree? Only the fruit or whatever that deserve to stay in the tree. And so this is the Christianity. If you're going to, keep from going all the way out, it's not a bad place to stop.
And that's kind of part of my story.
So you stopped there for a while, and then you got back on the train and went further down the road.
That's right.
Exactly.
Tokens. Yeah.
Do you want to hear the deconversion part of it?
Absolutely.
It's kind of that. So I mentioned that Bible school that I went to. So I made a bunch of really good friends. A lot of people I still consider my friends. It was a broad group of people from that school, and then I was done with school. I went off to actual college. Got my 4-year degree. Got married the final year of that, and my wife had to go to school back here down in the Twin Cities for a year, and so I moved with her. This is the year we got married. We up and left Fargo and went to the Twin Cities. And
so, how old were you when you got married?
23.
And she was
20. She was 24.
Okay, she's older.
She's a little bit older.
But did you feel compelled by God? It was God's will that you get married or anything like that?
It was, that's the, I guess, to be frank, we were burning with desire, man. I mean, honestly, we didn't want to, we really felt like we had to get married so that we could not live in sin, right?
Exactly. Better to marry than to burn in lust and all that stuff. Yeah.
Wow.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Wow, that's so weird. You're the only people we've ever talked to that, had that problem.
Problem in quotes, air quotes.
No, my wife and I did the same thing. I mean, we dated for 5 years and were sexually active off and on that whole time.
Right.
But every time was just a treadmill of guilt, that
Totally.
that you're trying not to have sex, and then some hot and bothered night, you go for it, and then afterwards
Why
you're
did I
like,
do
oh, God saw us do that, And so I remember one time going to a church back when churches would leave their doors unlocked, or maybe I had a key because this was a church in my little hometown. Mm-hmm. We went and sat on the stage and had communion together, and we're just trying anything to help us stop this pattern of having sex.
Wow.
And, it wasn't a couple months later, I'm sure we had sex again. So,
Wow.
Anyway.
Isn't that something?
Sorry.
No, honestly, Kat, that's a really beautiful story. if I'm harking on
It's
just kind
beautiful and torturous. I mean, we had a lot of sexual healing. All right. So there's levels of sexual healing, because once you get married and you're still Christian, then you're learning how to have sex guilt-free.
Yes.
It takes a while.
Oh, I see.
Then when you're married,
sense.
like my wife and I, and you're no longer Christian, now we're learning how to have sex without any religious goo or just strings attached to the emotions.
Nobody's looking in on you.
Yeah, nobody's watching. Or I don't know that that's ever bothered me, because I think God loves fucking. But even when I was a Christian, I thought, well, he made it. He made me like this, so
let's go for it.
Go for it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah,
anyway, lot of emotions, psychology around sex and religion. So for sure. Okay, so back on track. You got married, and you both moved to where?
The Minneapolis metro area,
Okay,
where I live now. We moved around a couple times within the city, but
now were you at 23? You weren't done with college.
I was.
Okay.
We had just completed college. She had one more year. That's why we moved there. I had just finished my degrees, but it's a degree in English. There's not a whole lot you can do. Honestly, my plan was to become a professor. As far fetched as I now see that, I don't know if I could have done the whole 4-year master's, 4-year PhD, and then try to find an original thesis in the field of literature or literary critique.
You could have.
That's not far fetched.
Yeah, I guess I'm trying to be a little humble there, but I
Well, lesser men than you have done it.
That's for sure.
Sure.
I went to school with them. I know that. So what do you do now then, Jeff?
Well, what did you find when you first came to town?
That's kind of part of my story. So I had a friend who, when I moved here, he had stayed here after he went to that Bible school. He stayed here and had been living here for 4 years. He actually got married right away. Mm-hmm. Right out of Bible schools to his wife. They're still married. Mm-hmm. They were 20 and 21. I mean, they did the whole really, really young thing.
Yep, sure.
And he's, he was one of the friends I had made going to school here. And he worked for a company, or he had his own business that sold insulation, a certain kind of insulation that you put in attics. And so I did the installation of the insulation for him for a brief time until I found a job with the company that I currently work for in customer service. So I work for it's a large corporation, Fortune 500 company that I work for now.
So did you ever have a thermometer when you were up in some of those attics?
Yeah, dude, man. Oh my gosh.
Tell me, what's the hottest?
Dude.
Holy crap. It was there. I remember there was a time in there. It was 100 degrees outside.
Oh, geez. And
humid as well. I don't know if you know anything about the summers up in this part of our of the States, but it gets so humid up here.
Right.
It's not a dry heat like down in the south, some places in the south, but
yeah.
The humidity was so. I don't know. I didn't bring a thermometer up there, Cass, but it felt like it
would be 130 maybe.
Oh my gosh, it was so bad, and it gets cold up here too, and that was the other part. Working in the cold attics.
Yeah, there's that.
Yeah, it's it paid the bills for a while.
Yeah.
Kind of rekindled my relationship with that friend, and we've been good friends ever since. That part of the story is that friend eventually he got really successful, and he ended up having what we'll call a little bit of a moral failing that ended up being kind of public in our circle of friends. And a lot of those friends at the time, I think felt compelled to shun him in a way. I don't know a lot of the details around what everyone else thought about that time, but I had heard that he was really having a tough time, and none of his friends from our group were really reaching out to him to make an attempt. And as a Christian, I felt that it was my duty to reach out to him and just have a conversation about it and talk to him. And so we did that. This was about 2.5, 3 years ago. I met with him, and I was just going to ask him, we all had thoughts. I was just going to ask him about this specific situation. But from that conversation, I learned that he had rejected Christianity altogether, that he had become, I think he identified as agnostic or atheist at the time. I don't remember. But that was where I felt the call of God. I knew as his friend, I knew that it was my job to win him back, that it is my job to continue to converse and, not be like some of his other friends who were, giving him the cold shoulder and not caring. It was my job to love him and show him that, that this is true and that he doesn't have to go to hell and all that stuff. And so that's kind of where my journey of deconstruction began. I sought out to win a Christian back, and we embarked on a 2-year-long
pilgrimage
debate, I guess. Where we would text almost every day, arguments back and forth. I fell deeply in love with William Lane Craig for a long time, and all sorts of other Christian apologists.
Well, you had to dig in and become a better apologist if you were going to engage with him, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, honestly, I had no idea what I was in for. I was the type of Christian, Cass, where I was very intellectual as a Christian. I was the guy who, I didn't have a lot of tact either. I remember having a conversation with another Christian when I was still a Christian about the concept of infant baptism, which is a really big one in Lutheranism. And I had this girl in tears because of my arguments to show that, there's really no guarantees. There's nothing in the Bible that says an infant who hasn't been baptized is going to go to heaven. There's no logical reason to believe one way or the other. It's only an emotional response that gets us to the place of, well, God wouldn't do that, and there's must be an age of accountability or something like that. Right. So I remember being that guy. I was always the guy to take that intellectual approach, and so I knew my stuff pretty well when it came to the Bible, when it came to apologetics. Obviously, I got a lot better at it, and eventually I lost that debate. And I think I'm not like a lot of people, I guess, that I know where they get in that situation. They know that they don't have a good answer for these questions that this agnostic or atheist or non-believer is bringing to them. And they typically go, well, if you're not going to listen to me, if you're not going to listen to the truth, then, I guess I can't do anything for you. Or they just kind of shrug it off as, well, for whatever reason, God's going to show them and I can't do it through reason. I was too honest for that, I guess. And I don't try to say that as like me bragging. That's just the way I am, man. I knew that I didn't believe it anymore. And I had to just be honest with myself. And I kept that to myself for a while and tried to find help. But at the end of it, this was just in February of this year, I finally confessed to my wife that, this journey I've been on, it's led me to this place now where if I'm honest, I don't believe. And that's where I'm at.
Jeff, was there a single argument that your friend sort of presented to you that was like, kind of stumped you? Or was it just a gradual kind of thing?
It was very gradual, because, when you do that for as long as he and I did, you hear every argument and you combat it too. So, so when you hear these arguments, before they're even done typing the text of the argument, what they're going to say, what your response is going to be. So it's kind of maddening in a way. But at the same time, those arguments, if you keep thinking about them and you keep thinking about the Christian apologetics answer for them, the more you do, I think any honest thinking person will see that it's just not good. It's not a good answer. It's not reasonable. And so for me, there were a lot of them. The one I think that I'll say two. There were two. The first one that I think that I really point to that really kind of gave me the biggest doubt was coincidentally the fact that I can doubt this at all.
Really? Wow.
There's and it's kind of connected to, I can't remember the name of the philosopher, but it's a very recent, in terms of philosophy, critique of Christianity, called nonresistant unbelief. It basically states is that if people are earnestly seeking God and they're not, they don't have any checkered past where they feel like God has hurt them, they've lived a good life, or just for whatever reason, they don't find any evidence for God in this world satisfactory, and God is all-powerful and perfectly loving, then that doesn't make any sense.
Right.
That's essentially the premise of the argument.
Well, let me interrupt here and just say I think this comes up so much, and I don't want to be an echo chamber to where we act surprised when our guests say this over and over, week after week, because in a way, the people that we have on, and that you and I are, we're singing this same song.
Yeah.
Because, and I think I think sometimes bifurcational binary thinking simplifies things, at least in a moment's time, to lay things out. But we're really talking about faith versus reason.
Yep.
And when you were talking about some of your friends that when they bump into these cognitive dissonances, they resort back to faith. Well, I just have to trust God.
Yep.
And that God's wisdom is above mine, and it pleased God to make it foolishness to me. So the fact that I'm bewildered is actually part of the plan. And I just need to trust the bigger picture, and that's God is good, and I'm in His hands, and He's going to take care of this. And even all these doubts that not only I'm having, but my peers are having, they're not my problem.
Right.
And so you just kind of lay them on the altar, or in the sea of forgetfulness, or whatever. Take it to the cross, and they lay it. God. Yeah, let go, let God.
Right.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. In fact, this week I posted something by Anthony Magnabosco, who's the street epistemologist, and he was talking with a guy. And one of the questions that was just, so telling or confounding is everybody that he talks to on the street, when he's asking about their confidence, so you are 100% sure there's a God, and that it's the Christian God, and that He loves you, etc. And then he begins to try to chip away at that confidence level. And he says, well, how could a method for arriving at a truth, in this case faith, be reliable if the conclusion varies from person to person to person to person? Yeah. So the reason why, in some ways, when you took on your friend as a love project, probably, it's like, I'm going to reel this guy back in. This is the right thing for me to do. This is a noble thing for me to do, both to God and to Him.
Yep.
Sure.
So you were taking the moral high ground by staying engaged. In fact, you're kind of my Hunter McFarlane. Of all my friends that disassociated from me, he stayed engaged. And I can tell you that it's probably partially because he wants to reel me back in.
Totally.
And so, you're the one that hung tough with this guy. So if you're going to take the William Lane Craig route, which is logic and reason, and then, and in a way, you don't have faith as your pull cord. Like, you're not going to resort to that as an out, that easy out. Well, trust God, let go, let God. You don't give yourself that pull cord, rip cord.
Mm-hmm.
Totally.
Because you don't. You don't have that out because you won't allow yourself intellectually to do it. Yeah, this is where you're going to end up.
It totally is.
This is. I guess what I'm saying when I started this rant is that we shouldn't act surprised.
Yeah, no.
When week after week, guest after guest, our guests are just too smart and too honest with themselves, and another recurring theme in all of these stories is, even at the point where I was doubting and questioning God, I had the sense that if there is a good God, this is what He would want.
Yep. Sure. Exactly.
Like late in that stage, you're still thinking, hey, the most Christian thing I ever did was leave Christianity. And a lot of people say that.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, and when you get to that place, and I'm no different, when you get to the place where you no longer can sincerely believe something based on reason, as a Christian, you're still not quite ready to let go. And that's where you're praying and asking for God's help in convincing this person all throughout the time. And honestly, I grew as a Christian through that time, stronger and more faithful. And then
you were digging in.
Yeah. But when you get to that point, personally, that's when your supplication turns inward. And that's where you start asking God, okay, now I'm starting to see why this person doesn't believe.
Yeah.
And now, God, if you're real, because that becomes a question, then you start asking that God, and then you start really getting personal with God, and asking for him to come in and not only help out supernaturally with this person in a more real way, because you know what that's like, but also save me.
Yeah.
Because I don't believe this anymore.
Yeah.
You know my heart, God. You know that I can't believe this thing, if I'm being honest. You know these things. And if you're real and you need me to be a part of your family of God, and need me to be a child of God, then you know what it takes.
Yeah.
You can come here. You could show up in this living room right now and prove to me that you exist. And that'll be enough. You can show up on my Damascus road and blind me and turn me around on a dime, because I know you can.
Yeah.
And if it's true, then that's what I expect.
Exactly.
And it never happened.
Right.
Yeah.
I had a friend in college where he was deconstructing and I was still strong. And he said that. He goes, look, Paul had a fucking sign.
Yep. Yeah.
And that's not fair.
Exactly.
I mean, really, Paul's road to Damascus story pissed him off to the hilt, because I didn't get one, and I'm waiting.
And Paul wasn't even looking for a sign. He was
a persecutor,
actively killing the Christians.
Right.
He was doing the opposite of looking for a sign.
So what human on the earth would have a blinding light on a road, in a personal experience that was unexplainable and undeniable? What human wouldn't believe at that point?
Yeah, at that point, because he was an epileptic, I think.
Well, yeah,
Paul
that's what
was,
they're saying
but,
now.
But anyway.
Or if it even happened. I mean, who knows?
Yeah, exactly.
That's what it should require. That's what every person should require to believe in this. Supernatural claims require supernatural evidence.
All right, so let me play devil's advocate, Jeff. I'm going to come at you with Jesus saying it's a wicked and perverse generation that seeks for a sign.
Yeah, and I mean that's special pleading to the to what the claims are already saying. I mean, we're holding that claim up to scrutiny. You can't look at the world you live in and just assume that there's a God. And I think that it all goes back to where the burden of proof is, and that's where William Lane Craig kind of comes back into it. If there was a point where I was still into him, I was still like, yeah, man, he's got something going on, and a lot of stuff he says makes sense. I mean, he's ironclad, but you keep reading and you get to a point where there's stuff he publishes on his website. You can actually read this on his website where he says, remember, you cannot let the atheist shift the burden of proof. Mm-hmm. Well,
what?
I mean, that's it right there.
Yeah.
I mean, if the burden of proof is not on the Christian, they've got a pretty, it's a decent case. It's something you can actually.
But it is on the Christian, really.
But it absolutely is. That's the point.
Yeah.
That's where the epistemology comes. That's where you start. You have to start somewhere. If you start with, let's look at the world and try to figure this out and not bring any Christianity into it, there is just no way that anyone would come to the conclusion that, well, obviously there's only one of them, and he had a son and he died for us. That doesn't make any sense at all.
The chink in the armor, or that one, I guess when we're talking about dragons, they've got that one scale missing, on Frodo or whatever, whoever it was that had to. The chink in we know for Ken Ham that he guards, like, for his own life, creation versus evolution, because he knows that's the cotter pin. If this goes, it all goes. Yep. And here's William Lane Craig saying, the chink in our armor is we have to always guard and defend that the burden of proof is on them, because he'll always have the upper hand as long as he has that.
Right.
But he knows he'll lose it. It's almost like thumb wrestling, and he knows that I'm going to be done as soon as I give up.
The Achilles heel.
Yeah, that the burden of proof is on the theist.
Yeah.
And I think where there even is still some merit in the argument over where the burden of proof is that if you've got your I was just listening to your last podcast, Cass, with Chris Johnson, and that you've got your firebrand atheists on the other side as well, who are saying absolutely not. There is no God. And furthermore, you're terrible as a Christian.
Right.
That shifting around that type of opposition is that it's easier for the Christian apologists who have the burden of proof reasoning to say, no, you're making as equally as hard to prove claim as you assume we are.
Right.
Where it gets difficult is when you've got someone like me or a lot of other people who say, we don't know.
Yeah.
We don't know the answer.
Well, that's where your honesty and your integrity comes into question. Because even when Anthony Magnabosco is doing street epistemology and he's got this 100% scale with people, he always, because I when we had him on the show, I said, so you're a 0%, and he goes, oh no, you can't. I'm a 2 to 3%, because you just have to leave this gap. If you're going to be honest, you have to leave that little gap that says, yeah, I don't know. And what I love about it is it leaves that like you said, non-resistant unbelief. It leaves that non-resistance non-resistant. Yep. But if you go to zero, you're now stonewalling. You're basically saying, I know. You know.
Exactly.
Whereas non-resistance and amiable and teachableness and listening and niceness says, all right, I'm all ears. Show me.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and that's a beautiful place to stay, and it's the honest, most integrity way to stay. Yeah. So I hear you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Jeff, you were saying the doubt thing. So you had that non-resistant unbelief. Yep. That was one question. What was the second question then?
The second one, you guys will be familiar with. I've heard you guys talk about it before. I think you actually quoted on one of your episodes, Cass, I think it was you, David Bazan.
Oh yeah, Bazan. Yeah.
And I had heard it as well.
God love that album. Curse Your Branches.
Curse Your Branches. Dude, it's like, oh man, I listen to it 3 or 4 times a week. It's just like my.
It was a daily part of my deconversion for sure.
Totally, but it wasn't. I mean, the album is just, it's soothing and helpful, and it's really good to listen to, and it's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
The concept where I listened to an interview of his. And I'm sure you said it before, but the place I heard it was there's a podcast. I believe the guys are from Nashville as well. It's called Sons and Doubters.
Don't know it.
Anyway, I believe they still identify as Christian, but they deal with Christian doubt. They're kind of like the deconstructionists podcasts. I don't know if you've heard of those guys, or a lot like the liturgists, where they deal with kind of.
Now the liturgist I'm very familiar with. Yeah.
Right. So anyway, the interview with David is where his big thing is the doctrine of hell, and when he finally had he had a kid, and it was very similar to me, and he realized there is absolutely not a single thing that my son could do that would make me want to torment him for even an hour, let alone
30 seconds,
an entire eternity.
Sure.
Right. I never have heard a decent answer to a Christian that even remotely comes close to figuring out how that is in any way logical. There is absolutely no way, and it's deplorable. And Cass, I know I've heard you say you hate talking about it. You hate it so much, and I agree. I mean, it's bad. I don't want to bring up something that is.
Yeah. I only hate it because it's deplorable. Yeah,
it's so bad, and so to me, that's where I really kind of dug in and said, okay, that's essentially, I don't believe that anymore, but I'm going to try to remain Christian. But in the same way that a lot, you talk about the cotter pin, right? Mm-hmm. That's the one in Christianity for me. If there is no hell, then I don't see the point in believing in a savior to save us from it. And so that's why I didn't stay progressive Christian for very long. I just don't.
That's interesting though, because a no hell belief system is almost the definition of progressivism. Like the Christians,
Like universalism, really.
yeah, that's one of the steps. Is people go, they go to be basically Jesus saved everybody, or annihilationism, to where there's just no suffering for the depraved.
But that's just, I mean, I've heard you guys say too, that's just as bad. I mean, you're still discriminating against billions and billions of people for not believing something they don't have a reasonable shot at actually believing.
I saw a shirt on Facebook yesterday that said Calvinism.
Yeah.
# Some Lives Matter.
I saw that too.
Yeah.
I didn't see it. Oh, my.
And you know what's funny about that, Cass? I've thought about this often too, is, I mean, if there is one brand of Christianity that actually does the best job of approaching some logical consistency, it's Calvinism. Mm-hmm. Because that is actually, you can say that, you're correct. There is evil in this world because God literally just doesn't care about those people. Mm-hmm. He actually only cares about the people that he's decided. The problem with it, obviously, is that there's verse upon verse in the Bible that says he loves everyone, and that's but at the same time, if you're trying to rationalize a worldview, a Christian worldview, I find that one the most technically, logically consistent, other than the fact that you can't believe in free will, and that denies the human experience.
Yep. So that same college friend that I was referring to earlier that hated the road to Damascus experience, the other thing was Romans 9. Yeah. Where some clay is made for noble purposes and some clay is made for trash. Yep. That's right out of Paul, man. Yep. Wow. Yep. It's right there in black and fucking white. And I mean, I remember the time that he opened up his Bible and he read it to me. I think we were sitting in his car or something. And he just said, full stop. I mean, he'd read it. And then he said, we're done here. We're done here. That sentence,
That's it. Yep. So, I'm out. If that's it.
Then when you deconstruct the inerrancy of Scripture, you can just say, well, Paul didn't write that, or Paul hears in part and prophesies in part, and so he got this wrong. Right.
Well, you can do that. Answers for everything, don't you?
Well, you do. It's gymnastics. We talk about it all the time. I mean,
it's totally true, and that's funny too. I mean, progressive. You talk about, a lot of people like to say, well, progressives just pick and choose what they want, and they can believe it. You're doing that too, fundamentalists. Mm-hmm. I mean, honestly. Yeah, they're not obeying the 613 laws of the Old Testament. I guarantee you that. So.
How true. So what happened next then? So you're atheist, but you have a family.
I want to know how your wife.
Yeah, how did your wife?
How's your wife handling this?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's difficult. She still loves me so much, and I know I don't deserve that. Is in so much as I think that she would have every right to say this is not what I signed up for, Jeff. Right. So, I think what makes it a little more complicated is the fact that we do have 4 kids under the age of 6, and we know how devastating that would be. But in all honesty, that her main motivation, I believe that her main motivation for sticking with me is because she does love me, and I'm sure as she's still a Christian, and I'm sure that she still has hope that some way I'll find my way back to Jesus. But really, a lot of our conversations recently are centered around what we teach our kids and how we raise a family. Mm-hmm. Honestly, in an interfaith relationship, because that's what we have technically.
But how can you? I mean, you still work, you still bring food home. You know what I mean? Money home. I mean, you're still a great guy. What's not to love here? I mean, you just happen to think, just a little differently.
Well, he's saying that she loves him.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that, and I think that that's part of it. I try to be a good person. I always have, and I do. I honestly love her, and I care for our children more than anything. I think that where it gets really difficult, especially in a relationship where one person is fundamentalist leaning Christian and the other person is not, is you rub up against, what do you teach your children about this and that, and not just social issues, but the doctrine of hell, which is central to Christian belief. I don't want to teach my children that they're worthless and that they're so bad that God actually had to kill his son because of how bad they are. That is what, I mean, they might not quite understand it right now, but there's some deep-seated things that you're teaching your children when their minds are very, very moldable and very susceptible, and they really don't have a choice but believe what you teach them.
Yeah.
It's not fair, and I don't want to teach my children that they're crappy, and that I think that some people would classify that as child abuse, and I don't want to say that. I know that that's probably more inciting some anger in the people that believe that. But honestly, if you do stop and think about it, that's a pretty terrible thing to teach someone, especially if it isn't true.
Well, how do you reconcile that with your loving wife then?
Yeah, it's tough. So one of the things that actually we're doing right now is we're reading a book called Love Wins by Rob Bell. I'm sure you guys.
Oh yeah.
We're actually reading it together.
Yeah.
And it's
That's great.
My wife, in all her fundamentalist leaning, she really, I think she really is trying to see, and she really wants to believe that I'm not going to hell. And I think that if you ask her deep down, she would say that she doesn't actually believe that just because. And I don't know that she has a really logical answer for it, but it's because she loves me, I think.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to bridge that gap for her and say there's a brand of Christianity out there for you, honey. If you don't want to believe I'm going to hell. Yeah. Here's one. Let's go. I'll go down this road together for you. And it's funny, just that we read. I don't know if you guys have ever read that book.
Yeah, I have.
But the first chapter is just Rob just asks all of the questions that I had, and she had never been asked them before. And honestly, and Rob has a nice way of putting a lot of those questions and just building on them and building on them and building on them. And she, after we read the chapter, she said, I'm really intrigued. I never thought of some of these things. It definitely, opens me up to that possibility. Wow. And I had said, I'm in the same boat as you, honey. I had thought of all of these questions before. And the fact that Rob also thought of all of them and still comes to the place where he can consider himself a Christian, that opens me up too. So I'm in the same place as you, honey, I said. And so that's kind of where we're at. We're both searching. We're both, open to possibility. I still don't believe in that in Christianity, but we're trying to make it work.
Yeah. Well, I love, this is a beautiful thing, man, to take on that book together. I'm glad that she's willing to do it because in a way it's a book on your side of the story, even though he's a Christian, but it's certainly a meet in the middle type book, and to read that together, that's awesome. I mean, we've had couples on the show. We had that, she was a Catholic and he's an atheist.
Yeah, I remember that one.
And, they seem to be working it out. Obviously, she had to do a lot of meeting in the middle as well as he did. And this is this non-resistance. If you're both non-resistant, then you can come together. I think a scripture comes to mind. It's actually that love covers a multitude of sins. And so if she loves you, and yet there's these things that she's in disagreement with you about, then love kind of compensates for, I mean, it's not just religious differences. Like I smoke and my wife hates the fact that I smoke, but she doesn't leave me over it because she loves the other 99% of me or whatever, I mean, you pick your battles when you're correlating, and sharing life and sharing parenting and sharing bills and sharing life.
Yeah, totally.
You have to compromise.
You have to.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And then the other thing is that because I think historically we used to, when we were Christians and raising kids and we were deeply involved in Christian radio, and every day on the air was a whole hour show by James Dobson, Focus on the Family. And he is a child psychologist. I mean, he does have an education, and every now and then he would make total sense. Like if he just stuck to child psychology and wasn't tainted by these doctrines, he's probably got some good advice in there somewhere,
Yep.
And I guess where I say all that is that when you guys are sitting down together and working out how do we raise the kids and how do we teach them, what do we teach them, then at least you're that amicable guy that says, all right, even though this comes from the scripture, there's nothing wrong with it. It actually is going to be good for my kids to X, Y, Z or whatever it is.
Sure.
But then hopefully that you can resort to reason and rationality and maybe even science. Like if she says, spare the rod, spoil the child, and she wants to do corporal punishment, my wife and I, we raised our kids, whipping our kids with a wooden spoon because the Bible said it, and my kids turned out great. Like, I think they probably hate me in the back of their minds or something. They've got some dormant hate.
The wooden spoon was broken on my butt a couple times, Cass.
So we were all raised that way, and we turned out okay. But I guess what I'm saying is that if you together, you sat down, and especially with the internet, and you just Googled, like, what are the scientists, what are the child psychologists saying? What is the scope of opinion here in academia about wooden spooning, or whatever.
Whatever it is.
And then your wife, again, I'm just talking about this compromise of, like, your wife could say, okay, spare the rod, spoil the child, or, was written in the 6th century or whatever, it was because it's Old Testament. It would BC, 6000 BC.
Yeah.
Anyway, and now this is what we know.
Right.
And then she could say, oh, the knowledge now, it trumps that, not because it's just the wisdom of man and God, whatever. It actually makes sense. And anyway, these are the kind of things that you guys are going to have to work through, and you can do it.
Yeah. No, yeah, and you're right, and it's not just kind of the discipline part of it, which is a big thing, or what you teach your kids, and I want them to be open to science and not be like me where they were just shrugging it off and say, that's not true. I want them to, because especially now they're going to grow up in a world where being fluent in a lot of those languages that I just didn't care about is going to be essential probably to their livelihood.
Yeah.
So I really want them to grow up with a thirst for knowledge and not have this arrogant certitude that a lot of Christians like myself grew up with.
Yeah. Sure. And you're right about hell as far as it's so unnecessary to impose on them this ominous, looming, perpetual, like, this might happen if I don't cross my T's and dot my I's, then I might end up in this bad place forever. The fact that just hangs over your head at all.
Yeah.
Psychologically, your wife would have to, admit that is, even if it's true, don't tell them. They're not ready to handle something so daunting. And if we need, you can parade by the people that have testified that it took me years, even as an adult, to get over the horror and the nightmare of that looming possibility, not only for me, but for my loved ones.
Yeah, I totally get what you're saying, Cass. I would go so far as to say is that if that is true, then God did a terrible job of communicating that message to us. Is there anything more important?
Yeah.
If it's true?
Yeah.
And this is in the first chapter of Rob Bell's book, but the rich man comes to Jesus and says, "What must I do to inherit eternal life?" If the hell is true, he should have said, "You need to believe that I'm the Son of God, and then you won't go to hell." He never does that.
No.
Jesus doesn't ever say, "Hey, stop everything, the story, here's a little interlude. This is all important because there's a hell, and if you don't believe it, you're going there. Carry on with the story." He doesn't do that.
No.
He did a terrible job, if he's real, of preparing us for the reality.
It should have been bookended in asterisks and uppercase.
Seriously. It should have, and if you say, well, that's not the way God wanted to do it, he wanted to use all these authors, every single author should have talked about it. There is no greater truth in the world if it's true.
Well, and it's completely capricious if you're going to make this a hide and go seek game.
Yeah,
the stakes are way too high for that. Yeah. Well, I'm gonna make it mysterious so that some people find it and some people don't, like it's a fucking scavenger hunt.
Exactly. It just doesn't make any sense at all.
But by the way, the stakes of this scavenger hunt is the winners get to go here, and all of y'all are now going to line up in a firing squad and be shot over and over again for eternity or whatever.
Wow.
So nonsense, just nonsense.
Yeah.
So going back to something you said earlier, and I don't know if you want to go back there or not, but you were talking about the reason that you got an English degree was it was the thing that you were least bad at, and maybe you were talking. We're getting into self-discovery. Who am I? How do I identify? Totally. What's my place in the sun? Who am I? Who have I come here to be?
Yeah.
Are those things that, of course, every human wrestles with, but is that kind of what you were referring to as far as the self-identification?
Oh yeah, I mean, right now that's kind of the way I look at it. Back then I knew I needed a college degree for one reason or another.
Just get one, yeah.
I felt like it was important. I still do, obviously, but it was true. I never took science seriously. I wasn't terribly good at math. I wasn't really interested in social sciences, psychology, because a lot of the popular voices there, like Freud and they're not Christians. So
plus, it's the soft sciences,
right?
So you're so full of the urgency of the kingdom of God and the gospel getting out. Like I was the same way. I was a bad student because I saw this stuff as meaningless.
Yep, that's exactly what it was for me. And honestly, I've always been interested in writing, and I've always felt like I was a pretty good writer, and so English seemed kind of like the obvious place for me to land.
Sure.
And so now I look at it and I say, well, now I've got this English degree, and I use it from time to time. I feel like I can type a good paper, and at work I can clearly communicate in written form to my colleagues and do I've got some emotional intelligence as well, so that I don't use certain words that might be interpreted as bad, which in the corporate world is really, really important. But at the same time, I don't want to just when it comes to your meaning in this world, or what you want to do, or how you want to make a difference. I do want to make a difference. I don't know that working for the company I'm working for is going to be the thing that ultimately makes the worthwhile difference that I'm looking for. I don't know. I feel like I'm this. I don't want to sound arrogant, but I feel like I can do better. And so I don't know if you saw Cass, I started a blog, and I posted a couple things on your site. I hope that's okay.
Real, live, actual blog.
Yeah. It's kind of a play on your be a yes sayer to what is thing, and as well as just kind of a funny way to say is like, I'm actually doing this. I don't have any idea what I'm doing. I guess I've got some idea what I'm doing, but this is a real, live, actual thing that I have here that I'm going to try to bring you guys along with. So.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
No, yeah, I really appreciated that first post, I guess it was, where you start off talking about like you're mourning the loss of a friend.
Yeah.
And that like maybe one of your peers was killed in a car accident or something.
Sure.
And that's kind of the impression you get. Then you spin it around to where you're talking about God and that he left you, and now you're bitter.
Wow.
Or not bitter, but I mean, it's a different emotion.
Sounds like Julia Sweeney a little bit.
Yeah.
The way she felt so bad when she lost God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, that was kind of the intent. I know that piece, I think a lot of people read that and interpreted it. A lot of my Christian friends anyway interpreted it as,
they're good.
He's just leaving because of emotional
reasons. That's their first go-to.
Yep. And so I've had to, in the comments section, I've had to deal with a little bit of those questions, and it's been fun. I don't mind it. The difficulty, of course, when you're conversing about things like that over Facebook, is to try to keep it respectful and keep the emotion.
Of course,
down. But
well, that reminds me. Back in your 2-year debate with this friend of yours, that whole time, you said you were texting virtually daily and in this debate and stuff. And in that 2-year time, I mean, I got the impression that you two remained mutually respectful.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
We're still very. I mean, obviously, we're closer now, I think, than we ever were. And that's, I think, a part of that is because he's the only non-Christian in my life.
Yeah.
I should say that's not true. There's a friend of mine from college who was my best friend through college and a professed atheist the whole way, and he remained my friend and still is to this day, very good friends of mine, so I don't want to leave him out of it.
Are they physically close to you though?
No, he lives in Fargo, so that's kind of part of why my circle of friends here and where I live now is not none of them are they're all Christians except for this one guy, so part of it is that. And
is his wife still Christian?
Yes.
Yes. And that they're working through those same struggles that you and your wife are. Yep,
and they've got 2 kids.
Yeah,
and their latest kid actually was born the exact same day as our fourth. So we've got our kids are kind of the same.
And it might be the kind of thing to where I don't know. Is your wife and his wife friends?
Yeah, and that's part of it too. So our kids are like the same age, so they get together and
that
talk.
Could be a lifesaver relationship because they, at least one of the things that's and this is true of anything, but when you feel alone in something, that's not good. Well, your wife could feel alone, like I'm the only woman in this town married to an atheist or whatever. Yeah. Well, right across the street or whatever, she's got a friend that's going through the same thing, and they can talk, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, they can share, what do we call it? War stories,
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's, you're right about that. I hope that,
I hope so.
that part continues. Part of where, kind of back to your first question, Cass, about, we're trying to find my place in this world. Mm-hmm. I feel like I'm passionate about this. Right. And I've always I always felt like I'm a pretty good writer, but I've never really had anything to write about that I'm passionate about, and now I have it.
Yeah.
And part of me trying to find that, my latest post kind of ends. It starts off by saying, I don't believe these things. I just want to make that clear to everyone. And the last part of it is saying, I want you to know this about me. I don't want to hide from it. I don't want you to feel weird about it. I want to get it out there because I think that a lot of the division, a lot of the lack of community in an atheist or agnostic's life is created from that stigma of, well, all my friends are Christian and what are they going to think? And I mean, now they know it's kind of out there, but we can't really talk about it because hell or, because whatever.
It's awkward.
But it is awkward. And I'm trying, I think and again, I'm still trying to work it out. I don't really know what it's going to become or what it is, but I feel like there's a place in this world, and I know I'm not the only one doing it, but there's a place for reconciliation between the two groups.
Yeah.
And I want to do that. I don't want to be the firebrand guy, even though oftentimes I feel like
I am too
so
sometimes.
Hard. It's so hard not to just be like, that what you believe there is not only doesn't not make sense. It's really hurtful to a lot of people.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like my mission right now, anyway, I feel like my mission might be to try to cultivate a community of Christians and non-believers in some way. And I don't know, I'll be on that journey, I guess.
Well, the only way that aliens become less alien is when we expose ourselves. And so by what David Dark would call, you're expanding the space of the talk-aboutable.
Oh, sure.
So this awkward topic and this, I'm just going to put this out there. Well, yeah, at first, the first time somebody is exposed to this, it's going to be weird. But what I've discovered, having been out for a couple of years now with my own mother, is that she's kind of over it.
Yeah.
And the shock of my son is no longer believes in Jesus, and I used to be her pastor. And I'm her only son, and my father died 33 years ago, so I'm like the apple of her eye. And so this was just devastating at first.
Oh, I'm sure.
And now, like, we talk every week as a ritual, and I guess they figure out, just like, whatever, like xenophobia. Mm-hmm. Like, oh, I know a gay person, or now I know a Muslim, or now I've got a black friend, or whatever that stuff is. Sure. But it just takes out the mystique and the mystery and the unknown. Yeah. Well, the fear, one of our greatest fears as human beings is the unknown because of the rustling in the bush.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so we just otherize these people. This is the definition of xenophobia. So I'm applauding you because you're expanding the talk-aboutable and you're putting it out there, and then you're going to minimize this fear of the other, and people are going to realize, oh, he's still the same guy I've always known and loved. Yeah. I think, and thank you for that. I'm going to try. I think part of it is self-preservation. Mm-hmm. I feel like I cannot allow this thing in my life to ruin me. I'm not going to allow it to rob me of this community, of people around me, of my family. Yeah. I'm going to do everything I can to just be open and honest with everyone I know, and just and like you said, expand that realm where we can just start to approach being comfortable about something like that. But two, not just for myself, I hope it helps people. I hope that other people
maybe come out of the woodwork. And I've already kind of seen some of that within some of the comments of on my Facebook friends. And so I hope that it becomes something, certainly for myself, but also for other people.
Well, you really summarized just then the plight, because when you said, I'm not going to let this destroy my life, immediately Christians would resort to, well, come back. But you can't lie to yourself like that. That's not an option. Beliefs are not optional. And so the rock and the hard place of the not anti, but ex-theist is, I'm not going to let this ruin my life, but I can't go back. Mm-hmm. And so how do I navigate this? That's that's where we find ourselves. That's great.
It's as Bazan David says in I think it's the opening track of that. Mm-hmm. I swung my tassel to the left side of my cap, knowing after graduation there'd be no going back.
I swung my tassel to the left side of my cap, knowing after graduation there would be no going back, and no congratulations from my faithful family, some of whom are already fasting intercede for me, because it's hard to be a decent human being.
I don't expect to believe any of this is true anymore. It's not. I don't think that believing in Christianity is something that's in my future. And that's not to say that I'm not open. I'm, as we talked about non-resistance, I'm not.
Well, it would have to be a road to Damascus thing, which we've already decided not only can't happen and won't happen, but it'd be unjust if it did.
Yeah, totally unjust. Why would God grant this prayer and not the billions upon billions of others around the world?
Yeah.
You talked about your mom and your relationship there, and that's definitely something I can relate to, because my two brothers and my parents are both, they're all still, I would call them fundamentalist evangelicals. They're great people, obviously. And I think, they raised me the way they did, sincerely, because they believed it was the right thing to do. And I'm so grateful for not just that, but all of the other things that they taught me. When they find out something like this, we've had conversations, that's been as difficult as the whole marriage part of it has been and will continue to be. I'm sure some of the toughest parts of this have been conversations with my parents and my brothers. And so, man, if there are people out there listening and hearing this, as I'm sure they are, and they've been in similar places, or they're maybe going through it right now, I'd love to help. You can reach out to me or talk to me about that, or it's tough. It's that. Yeah. I don't know if there's a lot of words you can say to try to explain how deeply jarring it could be, not only for the unbeliever, but for the person who still believes those things, to have that ripped from them. It's almost like you're losing a son.
Yeah, and my hope is that in the future, you and I and everybody that we talk to on this show are forerunners of something that's going to become the zeitgeist of America.
Yes.
So like the next 25 years, what you and I have done, everybody will have done.
I hope so.
Mm-hmm. We're basically, pioneers. And this is, and it's lonely to be the pioneer on the frontier. Totally. Just watch Dances with Wolves. So we find ourselves dancing naked around a fire with a wolf some nights. But the other
at our best.
The other thing I want to encourage you is that if I appreciate you're an English major, you're a writer at heart, and you've started a blog. Now here's the thing about college, or mostly just college. The reason that college was valuable to me is it made me read that goddamn book and write that essay. It made me.
Yes.
And here I've been out of school for a couple of years, and I don't do shit anymore. Now, for a while, I gave myself license because I thought, I need a break. Well, guess what? Break's over, and I still haven't, because nobody's making me. I'm not a very disciplined person. So what I'm getting to is that when I started the podcast, and I know the people that have listened from day one have said that they've watched me evolve.
Yeah.
Like my journey has evolved in front of everybody, and in some ways I'm still finding my voice, but it's helped me. And one of the things is that I feel this self-imposed pressure that thousands of people are waiting on my next show. I have to put this out, and so week after week for over 115 weeks, I have done this, and I've made myself do it, and it has forced my own personal evolution. Much like a college pressure to write this paper. Yeah. So I'm saying all this to say, now that you've started this blog, I want to encourage you to make yourself do it.
Yeah.
And make yourself be consistent. It's almost like writers that say, you got to write 1,000 words a day, no matter if it's just gibberish. Just do it. I mean, Stephen King would say that.
Stephen King certainly does it, yeah.
So no matter how many readers you think you have or whatever, just do it for yourself. Keep writing, and by in the mere act of doing it, you will find your voice. You will help find your identity.
I think that's true.
And when earlier we were talking about place in this world, and I don't know how big into Christian music you were, but I can just hear Michael W. Smith saying, "My place in this world, place in this world."
I was this. You know what, Cass. This is my time. This is my dance. I'm gonna live every moment, take nothing to chance. So.
Oh, that's it. Yeah.
Beautiful.
You did listen.
You're a poet,
dude. I've heard you talk, Cass. I've heard you talk about Rich Mullins. For man, I loved the shit out of Rich Mullins.
Well, guess what, Jeff? I've looked into the magical crystal ball, and if he were alive today, he'd be an agnostic. I guarantee you. That's the trajectory he was on, right?
I kind of agree. I'd say the same thing. A lot of his song was, man, I listened to every album he made so many times.
Yeah.
When he got near the end, it got almost begrudgingly Christian.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
absolutely.
All of the things he was saying were just profound. And then at the end, he was singing Step by Step in a empty room with some kids, just because he felt like he needed to. I don't know that.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's what I'm saying. I think today he would have thrown in the towel, or at least been just more and more progressive and more loving and honest. And
I think he was the progressive Christian of that time.
Yeah.
He was the one voice that that brings up kind of another topic, Cass. I know you were obviously big into Christian music. But man, I am still struggling with being able to go back to some of that music that I used to love. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean?
Oh yeah. Hell, I wrote it. I've got CDs published that people write me and say, I love this CD, and I can't listen to it because I don't believe it anymore.
I know.
It's the awkwardness of that. But I'll get out stuff every now and then. What is it that I listened to the other day? I mean, I've got, I had at one point over 1,000 Christian CDs. I used to work in a Christian bookstore. I worked for Star Song for a while. I mean, it was my passion. One
of my biggest influences, even when I was deconstructing, was I know you've heard of Derek Webb.
Oh yeah,
he's friends with David Bazan. I don't know how that works. But
it's funny. Chris Hauser's a dear friend of mine, and he's a big Christian music record promoter, and we love Bazan together, I think. And he's one that introduced me to Michael Gungor, and then he wrote me. He lives in Nashville. I live in Murfreesboro, which is 30 miles apart. And he wrote me and he said, "Hey, Derek Webb is doing a concert in Murfreesboro, and I'll meet you there. You want to go?" And he's so generous. He buys tickets for everything I ever been to with him because he knows I'm poor. Yeah. And so I went with all this eagerness of like, oh my gosh, I get to hear Derek Webb. Now this would have been like at least 3 or 4 years ago.
Okay. Yep.
And I left there depressed because he was doubling down on his Christianity. I mean, he'd gone through all this honesty and integrity and questioning,
let me ask you this. Was it the concert where he did the 10-year anniversary and he was replaying the entire first?
No.
Okay.
No, it was just him and a guitar in a real small room. But here's the thing. I think it was right before or right after he I guess, I don't know what, moral failure, if we're going to use that term on this show. But somehow he cheated on his wife or something and they were separated. I don't know. But I just thought, I was naive. I was thinking, well, everybody's like me. Everybody's on the same journey I'm on. And I recognize it, and I'm going to go hear this concert and hear him, say things that I completely relate to. Well, no, he doubled down on his Christianity in that show, and much to the applause of everybody else there except me. And I left there just almost with a knot in my stomach of how disappointed I was in him. Wow. But and I think this is what you're saying, is that we witness these people, and Bob and I have seen it many times with guests, is that instead of letting themselves kind of go where the facts lead, they double down, they dig in deeper and tighter, and it's almost the last gasp of their faith, and we get to witness it. But
very true.
Yeah,
we're here Sunday morning. Your whole family's at church?
Yeah, they left at about 9:00, and they all. My wife rounds all 4 of the kids up every Sunday and brings them to church. And I actually worked for the church that our family went to. I was part-time. They paid me, but they paid me to.
What role?
I was in charge of all the greeters.
Oh yeah.
In the church, but I also kept some office hours where I would respond to emails, prayer requests, and I would also help manage some of our volunteers.
So it was pastoral.
It really was. I felt terribly underqualified, but I did it anyway, and I was, embedded into the fabric of that. Of the leadership of that church, and one of the toughest conversations I ever had to have was with my pastor to let him know that I don't believe anymore and I'm going to stop coming to church.
How'd he take it?
Not great. I mean, he's a good guy. He, as most pastors are, I think, and there were some tears, and but he
wow.
He's still, we're still friends and we still talk, but my wife, she still goes to church. She still goes to all the leadership meetings and all the, they had a leadership retreat this summer. She went to that. And so she's still embedded, I would say, into the fabric of the leadership of the church. And so that's kind of part of the interesting dynamic.
I can just feel those meetings where she's in attendance and the rest of them are all just going, oh, poor Vanessa, her husband's an apostate.
Totally. I know, man. It's so, that's part of this that kind of is nerve-wracking for me, just to know that she's there. Like, not in the same way, like it's kind of not embarrassing, but it's kind of like shameful for me because, but also like, I don't want her to have to go through that. That's not a place I want her to be, but
yeah. Probably not. I mean, pariah might be a strong word, but there is almost a scarlet letter on her, probably.
Oh, for sure.
The way they look at her.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the same way they probably look at me. Yeah.
Well, yeah, you're the evil one, but
I'm the one.
In a way, there's this pity for her.
Oh, totally. And it's the same thing I get from my parents and my brother now. My brothers. I mean, they treat me the same way essentially, but my mom, like, she'll just randomly just hug me and tell me she loves me. And, I mean, and I know that she does, but I also know why she's doing that.
Yeah. The impetus for that moment. Yeah. We know what that is.
Wow. So what about, I don't know, do you getting a little lighter? Do you go to movies, or what do you do for fun?
Oh yeah. I don't have a ton of time to go to movies.
Right. With 4 kids under 6.
Yeah, we've got Netflix and we do all that.
Okay.
I did go to the movie, to the new Star Wars flick, because I'm a big Star Wars guy. So I did make it a point. I went by myself because because I couldn't find anyone to go, but that's fine. And so for fun, I try to remain athletically active. I grew up playing hockey, ice hockey. So
of course.
Still do that.
Wait, in what context does a 33-year-old play hockey?
That's funny. No, that's maybe a little bit part of this story. So back, I've been playing in this league in this area, and hockey's huge up here. So there's any number of leagues, but what isn't very common of hockey leagues in this area and around the country is this is actually a Christian league. It's now affiliated with the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. But we'd put together teams, and you'd meet together about an hour before every game and get together as guys and have a Bible study essentially before every game, and then you'd go out, and so it was a ministry for a lot of people.
Sure.
When that season ended last year was when I had basically just completed my deconstruction, and now I'm reaching out to the guys. I know the guys who run the league pretty well, and I was actually a leader on the teams. I'd done the Bible studies before, so anyway, I reached out to those guys in an attempt not to let this ruin my life. I reached out to them and said, "Hey, you guys know my story, but I'm still wondering if you'd still be willing to let me play in your league this year." And they I think they're going to let me. So I'm going to continue to play hockey alongside a bunch of Christians, and I'm sure they're gonna they're gonna want me in the room too for the Bible study, and I'm happy to join that and do that as well. But that's kind of an interesting little nugget. I still play hockey, and it's involved in my faith journey as well. So that's part of it.
I know this is not why you're doing it, but this is where David Silverman is right in that you can be missional about just being an out atheist walking around the world and exposing people, again, dispelling the myth, removing the xenophobia, and that by being there and them knowing that you're atheist, they're going to go, "Why, it's the same guy, it's the same, whatever."
Exactly.
That's my hope. I know that in the same way that not all Christians are the people you want to associate with, not all atheists probably, or agnostics or nonbelievers are the people you want to associate with, but I hope to be one that people do want to associate with.
Without, and I think maybe I'd make this as a disclaimer or an addendum to this, because immediately I thought, as a Christian, whenever you're out and about and you're feeling the pressure, I'm representing Jesus. That's a heavy fucking burden.
Oh, totally. Totally.
And I'm not putting that on you to where I'm representing atheism. No, I mean, that's not it. Yeah, just be yourself. Yeah.
I know what you're saying though. That I don't know that it's terribly easy to even, I appreciate the encouragement, but I still probably will feel a little bit of that burden.
Yeah.
And maybe that's okay. I think that, if you don't believe that there's a Holy Spirit helping you represent Jesus, or like I believe there's no magic here helping me represent atheists. It's just me. That makes it a little easier.
Yeah. Well, any excuse to be a better person may not be that toxic.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this was awesome.
Yeah, Jeff. Thanks for.
Jeff.
Thanks for. And I know you started as a listener, and then you just said, "Hey, I'm not near as smart as your other guests." And now I want to just say, right here and now, bullshit. You totally undersold yourself, man. You're smart and you're well read, and I just think I'm awestruck a little bit that you would even think that I may not be caliber to come on your show. You're fucking totally caliber to talk. I mean, this has just been great.
It was. Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for that. I appreciate you having me on, and I know that I am a big fan. I'll continue to listen. I'll continue to participate in the discussion, as you say, and whatever you guys need from me, I'll keep the blog on, and hopefully, and keep having this conversation. I appreciate you guys so much. Thanks for doing what you do.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Okay, so Jeff Loken, what we've met here is a true Midwestern Lutheran.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? My wife grew up in the Midwest in Wisconsin as a Lutheran, as a conservative Lutheran, right? And she's the type, she still to this day says, don't be uppity. Don't think so highly of yourself that you think you know it. you're not special. Sure, you're smart, but you're not brilliant. It's all that kind of put down kind of thing because you're not supposed to be showy.
Yeah, I could feel that in him.
Yeah.
I mean, even right there at the end when he was saying at the church, I felt I was so underqualified. I mean, he sells himself short right and left.
And I think there's something in the water up there. You know what I mean? There's something in the way.
It's a modesty.
A cultural modesty. Yeah. And it's compelling. It's kind of nice.
Yeah.
But after a while, you think, well, no, you really got it together, But he doesn't want to.
No, that's a cultural thing.
Off that way.
That makes sense. Yeah. The other thing is, for me, as an Oklahoman and a Tennessean, Lutherans in my world, this part of the South, are they're kind of heady religion, high church, liturgical,
right. Sure,
and for the most part progressive. But where it sounds like the Lutherans of the Midwest is more Baptisty and more fundamentalist and conservative.
Yeah, in the conservative, maybe, but I really believe that the reason that a lot of people show up, and these are good Wisconsin people, they show up just like Fargo.
Yeah.
I mean, it's community.
Yeah.
It's the social thing afterwards.
Yeah.
It's that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we go to lunch afterwards.
Yeah, exactly. Go downstairs, have some coffee.
So we'll put a link to his blog.
Yeah.
And they're short. Like they're so far they're literally like a 5-minute read at most.
Sure. That's good.
And I think he's sharp.
Me too.
Because he's so undersold himself to me over our email exchange. I kind of was nervous, and not nervous, but a little bit like, we'll see how this goes, because I'm willing to not air a show that I don't think is worthy of the air.
No, this one though.
And here he comes, he delivers flying colors. And,
no, he's got. I mean, there's some real heart there. There's some real thought, and I loved him. I just thought he was great. I mean, I was sitting in awe listening to it, to tell you the truth.
So another thing we'll post a link to is this kind of this philosophy or theory or way of approaching theology with this nonresistant unbelief. And I think that sounds interesting. And I mean, in many ways, we probably already practice it or have applied it. But mostly what good scientists and academicians do is they just put it on paper.
Put a label on it.
Yeah, put names to it and define it. And so I'll put that out, and I'm interested in reading some more about that.
Sure. Sounds great. What a show. Well, thanks, Cass.
Yeah.
Always
Thank you.
do. I tell you, I learned so much. I do. It's like a master's education here.
I think it's worth repeating. Like we're over 2 years in here, and some of the listeners are probably new to your origin story as far as why and how I found you attractive as a co-host. And that is that as a complete non-theist, there's not a believing bone in your body. There's not a as far as just the main theology.
Yeah,
now you have a magical bone in your body. Like you love the thought of creating narrative and things like that. But as far as the super sky god, no.
The stuff that you went through, absolutely not. Have no understanding
it's
of that.
Alien to you.
Yeah.
But the other thing is that even though I was a Christian, I read a lot. I certainly read the Bible a lot. I read the Bible every day. But after I left, I have no desire to read any religious literature whatsoever. Yeah. However, what I've noticed about you, and as we became friends over the last 8 years, I think, is that you, as this atheist and you're a scholar, you read these books. You read books about religion, about Christianity, about things because you've been intrigued with it much more than I am. As a post-theist.
Yeah, it's just fascinating to me.
So when I hear you say, like you just did today, that you learn something every week, is that you're intrigued with the anthropology of these post-theists,
Yeah. And I have a heart for them. I hear them, I say this, I don't know how many times, but I hear them and I think, my God, they're just going through such pain. And it's so unnecessary, but it's the road they're on. It's the journey they're taking. So, wow.
All right, then.
I guess we're done, huh?
When a lull in the conversation happens, you better jump on it.
That's right. Say goodnight, Paul.
All right.
Okay.
Talk to you later.
Yes, thanks.